Welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihalcha, and today we have one of the industry leaders, Liz Bowles, CEO of Farm Carbon Toolkit. Welcome, Liz. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I've just literally, over the last couple of days, we've had our team meeting, away days, and we've had a really inspirational couple of days. So, yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome, and I'm excited to have you on the podcast today, and I'm sure you're going to be of great value for the audience. Now, before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what Farm Carbon Toolkit does?
Yeah, absolutely. So, an organization that was set up by farmers back in 2009, specifically really to help them to understand more about how they could farm in a more climate positive and nature positive fashion. And that's what we still do today. We're set up as a community interest company, and we're also owned by our employees.
Okay, that's really fascinating. And Liz, could you share the story of how Farm Carbon Toolkit was founded by farmers back in 2010 and what inspired this mission to help farmers become like more climate and nature positive?
Absolutely. So literally we had two very sort of forward thinking farmers, Adam Twine and Jonathan Smith, who sort of got together, and together with a few other farmers, they felt that something needed to be done to help farmers to really understand their potential huge role, because farmers can have a really huge role in supporting our transition to a more benign climate. So that's why they set up the organization, and they wanted it to be specifically for farmers and growers. And that's also why they set it up as a community interest company.
Okay, I see. And for example, what was the moment that convinced you to take that leadership role when you joined in the organization as a chief executive in 2022? And
Okay,
what
so
did you see as the potential
right,
for impact?
absolutely. I mean, what had happened through the 2010s, although climate change was becoming more important, it hadn't really resonated with farmers, really, probably till about 2018, when farmers were being told a lot that they were the problem and that they should stop doing things. And I think a lot of farmers felt, well, we don't really understand why we're the problem. So they started to use the calculator that we created and is available freely to farmers to use. They started using our calculator. And at that time, I was at the Soil Association, but I could see that this whole area of how we produce our food in a way that supports nature and enables us to get towards a climate that's livable, that was going to become one of the biggest challenges really facing mankind, because it's more difficult even than electrification. So for me, that was the moment, and probably it was in 2019 when we could see use of our calculator rising exponentially, that I could see that this is something where it needed that leadership of this organization, which at the time only had half an employee, in order to make the impact it could have.
Makes sense. Okay. And you last time when we spoke, you mentioned that your growth has been like entirely organic with no equity investors. But I'm curious about what's been the biggest challenge and reward of growing a mission-driven organization that way.
Okay, I start with the nice bit. So the biggest reward, and it was absolutely clear yesterday, is the fact that we own ourselves. So as an organization, we are all very passionate and driven by that knowledge that we can have a lot of impact in the world in a really positive way. So that's really the reward of working in this kind of organization. The challenge, I would say, is simply that we've grown from half an employee in 2020 to 22 employees now in 2025. And as you mentioned, we've done that without external equity. So the biggest challenge really is to make sure that as we grow, we've got the ability to really resource our
Yeah.
organization appropriately.
Okay, I see. And let's point a little bit on your community because you have like an amazing community around your business. And how do those value shapes your daily decisions and the way that you work with farmers and the partners as well?
Okay. So, given that we do have a really clear mission, we always have to ask ourselves when people come to us asking us to do things, is this work in line with our mission, with what we want to see in the world? Because it's ever so easy to get distracted, especially when what we do is in such great demands. So sometimes we actually do say no to some work if it sits outside our organization's mission. Um, but in terms of how our values shape what we do as an organization, it's very much about always wanting to see that impact, positive impact for farmers. And that always means working with them. So we're all the time we're empowering farmers and seeing them as the messengers to other farmers, even over ourselves, because we know that when a farmer stands up, more people will come and more people will listen than when somebody like even our advisor stands up.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And for example, also, could you tell us more about how those local connections influence your mission, like the Cornwall event where children wrote and performed songs about the climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was quite a recent event. It took place at the end of October. It's a project we've been working on for the past 5 years, working with the farming community in Cornwall. And some of you listening to this may know that agriculture is still critically important within Cornwall. And actually, there's still quite a large rural farming community. So the way that we work then in that county is that we stand beside these farming communities rather than being within a hierarchical system. And the event that Alexander mentioned was held recently in Cornwall. And the idea really was to increase our ability to reach more and more people in the community. And it was predicated on writing a song, music and lyrics, with children, but also with really good musical professionals that epitomised what living in Cornwall and agriculture meant to those school children. And it really was quite inspirational, the event itself. It was held on a farm, and there were something like 15 school children who stood on straw bales and they sang. And it was a fairly long musical piece. It went on for about 15 minutes. And they stood there for the whole of that time. And these children were only 8 or 9 years old. And it involved the local brass band from Camborne. And all of it was focused on expressing their understanding of farming and the natural world in Cornwall through music and song. And we actually shared the film, or we watched the film together, our team at our away days. And two of our staff were nearly moved to tears because they hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
And the effect on them was also electric. So and the reason for it was that here were farmers and the local community expressing in their own words what was going on. It was lovely.
Yeah, that's amazing. But for example, you as a farmer yourself, how do you personally balance like the producing food with protecting biodiversity and the environment on your own land?
Okay, so for me, I mean, I've been on a journey myself, and now what I do is I look at what I can produce most sustainably on my farm, and whilst at the same time making sure that everything that wants to call my farm home has got somewhere to live and something to eat. And that's kind of become more and more of my watchword. So what that's meant me doing personally is looking at the kind of grassland I've got, making sure it's as diverse as it can be. But probably more importantly, because it was quite diverse to start off with, is looking at leaving grass to grow tall at some times of year to provide habitat for insects and for some invertebrates rather than always cutting it and making it short. And that makes such a difference. And also through minimizing inputs, I think the nutrient quality of what I produce has gone up.
Okay, I see. But for example, now I want your honest feedback about this because many organizations talk about sustainability, But what does being truly climate positive mean to you in practice?
Okay. Yeah, and you're right to ask about that because there's an awful lot of talk about greenwashing and about actually what good is it really doing. But
Yeah,
we do know, and effectively, it's to ensure that the land, the farmland we're operating on, can properly support a wide range of biodiversity. And actually, it's really important to understand that whilst it's supporting that biodiversity, it's also providing a supportive ecosystem for the food that's being produced. And it does enable us to produce food with less reliance on artificial inputs like nitrogen fertilizer. It also allows us to produce food with lower greenhouse gas emissions and with better nutrient quality. And it can be done. However, what I would say to that is we've got onto a treadmill of thinking we just have to produce more and more food and use more and more inputs to produce that food. I also think there's a real benefit in how we as producers connect with our customers, people who eat the food, so that they understand a little bit more about what's going on. And I think that probably means a bit more trust on the part of farmers and also a bit more inquisitiveness on the part of people who buy our food and a better connection as well.
makes sense. Okay. And for example, walking us through how Farm Carbon Toolkit addresses these challenges, what makes your approach unique?
Okay, so I think what makes our approach unique is that there's an increasing number of advisory organisations working in this space now in the UK. But what we do differently is that we're not just a team of advisors and we're not just a provider of a farm carbon assessment tool. We do both together. And the benefit, I believe, of that is that we can do a more holistic job, but also what makes us different is that we absolutely believe in the need to empower farmers rather than simply tell them what to do. I think that's a really, it's quite difficult sometimes if you're an expert not to give everybody the benefit of your expertise, even if they haven't asked for it. And but it doesn't necessarily work until people have taken it on board themselves rather than feeling somebody's told them to do it. So I think that's what makes us different in this space.
Okay, that's interesting. And for example, can you like walk us through how the carbon calculator for farms works and what kind of insights it provides for businesses?
So when we first developed our carbon calculator back in 2010, it was probably one of the first to be developed in the UK. But what makes it, what we've tried to do with our calculator is to make it work at a whole farm level. So it enables any farmer or grower to go onto our website and probably within about 3 or 4 minutes start to build up their farm, their whole farm footprint. So we'll ask them about their use of inputs, about their machinery usage, as well as the animals they've got and the crops they're growing. But we also ask them about what's going on in their soils in terms of soil analysis. And we also ask them about the above ground biomass. And by that, I mean what's growing above the ground that's not part of a crop. So that's typically in this country, trees and hedges. And through doing all of that, we can tell them fairly accurately what their whole farm carbon footprint is. And the insights that this provides to farmers and growers is they can see fairly quickly where their hotspots are in terms of both emissions and carbon sequestration. And by sequestration, I mean removal of carbon dioxide from the air and
Yeah.
putting it into either soil or into the woody growth of trees and hedges. So they can see where they can make most impact.
Okay, I see. And for example, from my research, I see that your calculator is used across the four continents. And what kind of industries or supply chains are adopting it? And how are they using the data to drive the change?
Okay, so typically the businesses overseas who are using our calculator are food supply businesses. And very often what's happening is they're selling predominantly in UK food supply chains, but they're accessing global suppliers and they want to understand using the same calculator the impact of that food production no matter where it's been produced. And then they'll be using that data either as a compliance requirement from their customers, i.e. retailers, or in calculating their own supply chain footprint and to help them in reducing, or rather help them in meeting their science-based targets initiatives. Because increasingly now, food supply chain businesses are looking at their scope 3 emissions on farm and are wanting to look at how best to reduce those overall emissions to meet their SBTI commitments.
Okay, and with that being said, I have a little curiosity around this. So, for example, when you talk to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
Golly, oh, I think there's many. The most typical misconception would be kind of thinking that, and and it's a widely held misconception, and it's true across the whole globe, I think. When you grow a crop, you are always putting carbon into the crop, in its leaves, in its fruit, because the crop is an organic thing, and it will be made up of carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and oxygen, typically, and hydrogen. And the misconception is that because the farm has produced that crop, that quantity of carbon is a positive for that farm. It
Yeah.
would be if it never left the farm and if it never decomposed. But generally, neither of those two things are true. So generally, when a farmer grows a crop, they will sell it so that that carbon storage is not retained by the farm, it's gone. And generally, even if they kept it on the farm, it would typically decompose unless it was woody. And I think that's probably the biggest misconception, that all the time I think we probably need to do more to help people to understand that.
Okay, makes sense.
Mm.
And for example, now looking at the broader industry, how do you see technology helping farmers shift from traditional practices to regenerative farming in the next decade?
So, in answering this one, it's a combination. So, for farmers, they know increasingly what kind of practices will support more sustainable farming systems. And I suppose you can put them all within the bucket of regenerative farming practices. And certainly, what I hear from farmers is that they need to know more about the financial impact of those farming systems on their bottom line. And I think that's the thing that's driving them, is to understand that and also to feel confident in adopting them, because at the moment there's not enough information about how those practice changes will actually help them. So it's that confidence. Now, technology itself will improve decision making as it will provide more granular data, so then they can work less from hunches. Although I still feel that traditional knowledge cannot be lost because it really does underpin farming practice.
Yeah. Okay. And from what I know, you've grown from 7 to 22 staff in just a few years. And basically, which make me curious about your next growth plans. So how are you looking to grow for the next year?
So I think for us, really, growth will continue to be organic in response to demand for our services. And in carrying out that growth, we're also continually asking ourselves the question, why do we need to grow and what is the point of growth? So because we're not driven purely by profit, we have the opportunity to think about what, if you like, is the best way to move forward rather than just focusing on growth. And in that,
Yeah.
it's really imperative to keep everyone in the organization in the conversation, because it's ever so easy as a virtual organization that people lose track of where we're going.
Okay. And for example, if you could leave one message for policymakers and agri-tech leaders listening today, what would you want to them to understand about the role of farmers in tackling climate changes?
Okay. So, what I would dearly love policymakers and agri-tech leaders to take away is that, and I think they understand this a bit, but farmers and growers hold the key to all of this in terms of tackling climate change, because they're the people who are going out every day, making the decisions and taking the actions which affect at least 12% of the current UK greenhouse gas emissions. And they also hold the key to effective, low risk, lower cost solutions to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere within biodiversity friendly farming practices. And to really help them to take that role up, they do need to feel more valued and respected in this space in order that they can make their best contributions.
Okay, you see. And as you wrap up, I'm curious about what's on the horizon. So, when you look at Farm Carbon Toolkit journey over the next few years, what possibilities excite you the most?
I think what excites me the most is the thought of being able to expand some of the work we've done through projects like Farm Net Zero in Cornwall, which was a long-term project working directly with farmers, and to do that alongside developing the ability to help farmers bring their data, I use their data more effectively within our calculator as well as within other technologies, so that they can make better decisions into the future, because that will ultimately help them in moving towards more climate and nature positive farms more quickly. And that's what's needed to be able to do it more quickly.
Interesting vision here. And for listeners who want to learn more or potentially work with Farm Carbon Toolkit, what's the best way to get in touch?
What's the best place to make contact with us, did you say?
Yeah, so what's the best way to get in touch?
Okay, so we're a UK-based organisation. On our website, which is farmcarbontoolkit.org.uk, we've got our email address and our phone number, and our phone number is manned in working hours. You can always talk to somebody, and actually, I think that's one of our we always want to have somebody there to talk to you, rather than you having to just go into an inbox which may or may not get manned. And we're always really keen to talk to people, so please get in touch.
Okay, that's awesome. So thanks for joining me today, Liz, and for this amazing podcast session. And for anyone listening, make sure to check out Farm Carbon Toolkit socials below in the description, because this episode was packed with value, and I can wait to see what you build next.
Thank you ever so much, Alexander. I've really enjoyed speaking to you.
Likewise, and see you in the next episode.
Okay.